She lit a candle for their anniversary dinner, while he was across town feeding cake to another woman in her favorite restaurant. Not just any woman, a woman who thought she was his only wife. But what this man didn't know is that his wife wasn't the type to explode. She was the type to plan. To watch. To walk in wearing red, and end his double life in front of every guest, every lie, and the other woman herself. This isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about how a black woman turned betrayal into the most elegant revenge you've never seen coming. And by the time you reach the end of this, you'll ask yourself one question. If it happened to you, would you burn it down, or walk away owning everything? Before we get into it, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Now let's start with the night everything changed, the night she realized love had left the room and loyalty had followed it out the door. There's a moment in every woman's life when silence becomes the loudest sound she's ever heard. Tanya had lit a single white candle on the dinner table. The scent of lavender and vanilla curled through the air, calming, soothing, almost mocking. It was their anniversary. 8 years married. 12 years together. A love that had survived student debt, job losses, her mother's cancer, and the chaos of building a life from scratch. And yet here she was, alone. Again. The dining table was set for two. Her black silk dress hugged her figure the way Trevor used to. She'd curled her hair like he always liked it. Made his favorite lamb chops with rosemary glaze. Even chilled the wine he'd saved for a special night. Everything was perfect, except for the fact that he hadn't walked through the door. It was already 9:43 p.m. No call. No message. Not even one of his habitual excuses, running late, babe, or work stuff came up. Just nothing. But Tanya didn't cry. Not yet. Not this time. Because this wasn't the first anniversary where Trevor forgot. Last year he claimed to be on a business trip in Dallas. The year before that, he was too stressed to celebrate. The excuses had always come with just enough warmth to confuse her. But this time, something in her had calcified. Because this time, she hadn't told him she was planning anything. She had quietly booked a dinner reservation at Charles Laurent, the French restaurant where he had proposed. She planned to surprise him there after setting the mood at home. She'd arranged for the staff to bring out a small cake at the end of the night, chocolate mousse, the flavor he said reminded him of their honeymoon in Marseille. She even handwrote a card, "To the man I still choose, every single day." The irony didn't taste sweet anymore. It burned like ash. By 10:10 p.m., the candle had started to flicker low, and Tanya sat in stillness, a glass of untouched wine warming in her palm. She thought about the version of herself from 8 years ago, the one who smiled through chipped nails and overdraft notices, who believed that love was about showing up, even when life got hard. That girl had given everything to build something real. And somehow, she had ended up invisible. She reached for her phone, not to call Trevor, but to open her calendar. She clicked on a note she had saved 2 months earlier, Charles Laurent, 10:30 p.m. reservation under BC. It wasn't just a surprise. It was a test. Because for the past 6 months, Tanya had felt the shift. The late-night showers. The cold, distracted kisses. The mysterious business trips that never showed up on their joint calendar. She had started noticing receipts he never mentioned. Expensive dinners, hotel stays, ride shares to unfamiliar places. She had already done the math. Already checked his GPS history when he forgot to log out of the family account. Already matched the charges to locations. What she hadn't done, until tonight, was walk into the truth. And now, as the candle's final breath danced against the glass, Tanya stood up. She walked into the bathroom, reapplied her lipstick, touched up the smudge of mascara beneath her left eye. Her reflection stared back at her, not broken, not enraged, but sharp. The kind of sharp that doesn't cut in anger, but slices clean, with purpose. She slipped on her heels and grabbed the small black clutch that held the card, the receipt, and her questions. No GPS this time. She didn't need directions to betrayal. She already knew exactly where to find it. Tanya stood across the street from Charles Laurent, staring through the frosted windows as laughter spilled onto the cobblestone sidewalk. The rain had just stopped, leaving a soft shimmer on the pavement. She paused for a second, adjusting the strap on her clutch, then took a deep breath and crossed the street. Her heels echoed softly as she stepped into the restaurant's warmth. The maître d' smiled. "Reservation under BC?" he asked, just as she'd planned. Tanya nodded. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, methodically, before he could lead her to the private dining section. She didn't need to sit.
She only needed to see. And there it was. He was Trevor, her husband,
seated at the same table where he had once knelt, trembling, ring in hand, promising her forever. But forever, it seemed, had an expiration date.
He wasn't alone.
Beside him sat a woman with glossy blonde curls, dressed in a sleek ivory jumpsuit.
Elegant. Confident.
The kind of woman who didn't doubt her place at the table. The waitress brought over a slice of cake, chocolate mousse.
Tanya's cake.
She watched as Trevor leaned in, feeding the blonde woman a bite, laughing softly like he had nothing in the world to hide.
And she?
She clutched his hand with the certainty of someone who believed in every word he'd said. Tanya didn't move. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribcage and her memory.
This wasn't about catching them. She had already done that. This was about mourning something no one else could see dying, her version of the truth.
And yet, as painful as it was also clarifying.
She remembered the first time Trevor lied to her.
It was small, something about working late when he'd actually gone out with friends.
He laughed it off. She let it slide. She remembered the second time too.
A missed call. A weekend trip that didn't quite add up. But love made room for excuses.
Until it couldn't anymore.
Tanya's hand slipped into her clutch. She took out the card she had written just hours earlier. To the man I still choose. She folded it once, cleanly, and dropped it into the trash bin by the door. She turned and walked out without making a scene. Not because she wasn't angry, but because she had just decided something far more powerful.
Trevor wasn't worth the climax of her story. He wasn't the peak. He wasn't even the villain.
He was just a weak man with two faces, trying to live two lives. And the other woman?
She wasn't the enemy either.
She was a prop in a story she didn't even know was being ghostwritten by someone else's lies.
But Tanya? Tanya was the author.
As she walked back into the night, she didn't cry. She didn't curse the sky or call her best friend or scream at the injustice of it all.
She planned.
Because betrayal hurts, but it also clarifies. It pulls you out of your illusions and shows you who you really are. And who Tanya wasn't done yet. She had just started writing her second act. 3 days passed. Not a word from Trevor. Tanya didn't confront him that night.
Didn't storm into the house.
She returned home in silence, tucked Ava into bed, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Something deeper than rage settled into her bones, a kind of sorrow that only comes when the illusion you've been defending starts to crack under its own weight. But on the fourth morning, the twist came not through a revelation, but through a mistake. Trevor, always careless when he was overconfident, left his phone charging in the living room before heading out for another client meeting. Tanya had never been the kind of woman to snoop. But after what she'd seen, after what he'd done on the night they were supposed to celebrate their vows, nothing was off limits anymore.
She opened his phone. The password hadn't changed.
At first, it was predictable.
Photos.
Flirty texts. He'd saved her as sunlight. Tanya let out a bitter laugh. His lies didn't even try to be original.
But it wasn't the photos or messages that stopped her cold. It was a voice note. Sent just 2 days ago. Tanya tapped play.
Hey baby.
I can't stop thinking about the other night. You feeding me that cake.
God, it felt like a dream. I know we're still working through the logistics, but I just want it to be official. I want to be your wife. I want us to move forward. No more sneaking around. Promise me we're getting closer.
Tanya's heart didn't shatter. It sharpened. Because this wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just sex.
This woman believed she was about to marry Trevor. This woman believed Tanya no longer existed. The twist wasn't just that Trevor was cheating. The twist was that he had built a new identity. A new future. A new woman, wrapped in the same lies he once used to win Tanya over.
He was recycling romance.
And worse, he was ready to erase his wife to keep his new story clean. Tanya didn't scream.
She forwarded the voice note to her own phone. Then she pulled up her shared bank account app.
The puzzle pieces were all there: lavish dinners, hotel charges, a recent wire transfer that didn't belong.
She took screenshots. Every last one.
Then she opened an old folder she hadn't touched in years, her wedding planner notes.
From back when she was starting her own event firm.
Names. Venues. Vendors.
That's when she saw it. The Grand Plaza Hotel.
A name she hadn't thought of in years. But it was there, in her email, confirmation of a room block, paid by a card under Marcus T. Johnson. A reservation for a private celebration set for the following Saturday.
Large guest list.
Custom floral arrangements.
Cake orders. champagne fountains. Everything. It wasn't just a casual affair. He was planning a wedding reception.
Tanya's stomach turned, but her focus remained ice cold.
She closed the email.
Then, in one fluid motion, picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in nearly a year. "Lisa," she said, when her best friend answered. "I'm going to need a dress."
"And a ride." Lisa was silent for a moment.
Then, "Tell me everything. From the top." Tanya had always been underestimated. By Trevor, by his family, even by herself at times. But what none of them understood was that a woman who's been watching, feeling, and quietly absorbing betrayal doesn't break. She calculates. And now, she had all the pieces she needed. Trevor had scheduled the Grand Plaza Hotel for what he told everyone was a business gala. But Tanya's snooping confirmed otherwise. It was a veiled celebration. A soft wedding reception, dressed up as a networking event. No one knew it wasn't his first time down the aisle. No one knew Tanya still legally carried his name. And definitely no one knew the woman he was honoring that night believed she was his only one. Except now, Tanya did.
And she wasn't about to let it slide. She didn't want a messy confrontation or tabloid scandal.
She didn't even want revenge in the way movies scripted it, with screaming, slaps, and wine tossed across rooms.
What Tanya wanted was something cleaner.
Something that didn't cost her dignity, but carved up his.
So she made a call. Not to Trevor. Not to the blonde woman he'd been feeding her cake to. She called Patricia. Trevor's mother.
Yes, that Patricia. The same woman who once toasted at their wedding reception, who held Tanya's hand during childbirth, who used to call her daughter with unfiltered affection. Tanya hadn't spoken to her in nearly 9 months.
Not since the distance began to grow.
But when Patricia answered, her voice cracked under the weight of something unspoken. "Tanya?"
"Yes. I won't take much of your time.
"I just need you to hear something."
Tanya played the voice note. Silence on the other end. Then a soft gasp.
"That boy," Patricia finally said, her voice trembling. "He's lost his damn mind." "I'm not asking you to fix it," Tanya said. "But if you show up to that event on Saturday, just know you'll need to pick a side."
Then she called Lisa. Lisa didn't ask questions.
She just showed up at Tanya's door that afternoon with a garment bag, a pair of heels, and a single question. "How red is too red?"
Tanya smirked.
"If they're gonna watch, we may as well give them a show." The day of the event came fast. Tanya's nerves twisted like wire, but her eyes stayed clear. The Grand Plaza shimmered under golden lights and fresh orchids. Guests arrived in black tie attire.
Champagne flowed.
The blonde stood at the center of it all, radiant, believing this night was her arrival into a new chapter. Trevor floated through the crowd, smiling the smile Tanya used to know. The one that convinced her he was safe.
Loyal. Honest. Tanya watched it all from the mezzanine balcony. Not hiding. Not afraid. Observing.
And when the moment was right, when the blonde stepped up to the MIC to thank everyone for being part of their beautiful journey, Tanya made her move.
She took the elevator down.
Her heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of intention. Eyes turned slowly. First 1. Then 5.
Then all.
And as the MIC hung in the blonde's hand, still warm from her speech, Tanya stepped forward, extended hers, and smiled. "Mind if I say a few words?" The blonde, confused but polite, nodded.
Tanya turned to the room. Calm. Measured. Electric.
"My name is Tanya Johnson," she began. "And I wasn't invited to this party, not officially. But I should have been."
Trevor's smile faltered.
The blood drained from his face. The blonde's head tilted in slow realization. "Because I'm not just a guest," Tanya continued. "I'm the first Mrs. Johnson. And as of 2 weeks ago, still the only one." The room stopped breathing.
She didn't need to yell. Didn't need to accuse.
She simply told the truth, fact by documented fact.
The legal marriage. The shared accounts.
The ongoing deception. Calm, poised, undeniable. And as she reached the end, Patricia, Trevor's own mother, stood up and said what sealed the room in judgment. "She's telling the truth." The blonde's hand slipped from Trevor's.
The audience murmured. Some gasped. A few even left. But Tanya? She didn't stay for the fallout.
She walked out the same way she walked in, elegant, unshaken, unforgettable.
The days that followed were eerily quiet. Trevor didn't come home the night of the event.
Not that it mattered. Tanya had already changed the locks. She'd moved his things into labeled boxes, left by the garage, and sent a polite but concise text.
Your past now lives outside. Please retrieve it before the rain does. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The silence was its own confession.
But what surprised Tanya most wasn't Trevor's absence.
It was her own sense of calm.
The adrenaline had worn off, yes. But in its place wasn't emptiness, it was clarity. For the first time in years, she could breathe without second-guessing herself. She could sleep without wondering who he was texting. She could sit at the dinner table with Ava and feel present. She wasn't a woman abandoned. She was a woman unburdened. The fallout came in layers. Trevor tried the damage control route, texting apologies, trying to explain things as complicated, blaming the other woman for pressuring him into something he wasn't ready for. He said things like, "You'll always be my first love, and let's not throw away everything we built." But Tanya was done building for people who didn't show up to maintain what they helped create.
Then came the legal firestorm.
With Patricia's quiet blessing, Tanya retained a fierce attorney who specialized in financial restitution and asset protection. It didn't take long to trace how Trevor had siphoned funds from their joint account. Weekend getaways, luxury gifts, a down payment on a condo he never told Tanya about.
All of it documented.
All of it recoverable. And when confronted in court, he folded.
Fast.
The judge granted Tanya full rights to their home, primary custody of Ava, and a settlement that more than covered the damage he'd tried to hide. But what really stung Trevor, and what thrilled Tanya, quietly, was the part no document could fix: his reputation. Once word got out, business deals stalled.
Friends ghosted.
The blonde, understandably humiliated, released a quiet statement through a lawyer. "I was unaware of his marital status and have ended all contact."
But Tanya never gloated. She didn't need to.
Her revenge had never been about destruction.
It was about resurrection.
She poured her energy back into her event business, which flourished.
Clients admired her poise under pressure. Referrals tripled.
The quiet rumors about her power move at the Grand Plaza only elevated her status. But more than that, Tanya reconnected with herself. She started writing again, journaling at first, then slowly, privately, writing about women who walk through fire and come out flame-proof.
She started therapy. Started Pilates. Started saying no without apology.
She even joined a parenting circle where she met other single mothers who were rebuilding, piece by piece. Ava never saw her mother cry after the night of the reveal.
But she did see her rise.
And for Tanya, that was the most important part. Her daughter wouldn't grow up watching a woman beg for crumbs of affection. She'd grow up watching a woman demand a full table, or build her own. Trevor tried to reach out one more time on what would have been their 9th anniversary. He sent a long message full of nostalgia, blame-shifting, and lukewarm regret. Tanya read it once, then deleted it.
No response. No rage. No room for regression.
She had nothing left to say to a man who saw her as optional. Because once you know your value, silence becomes your strongest boundary. 2 years later, Tanya stood before a ballroom crowd, not in a red dress this time, but in a tailored white pantsuit, calm and radiant under soft gold lighting.
She wasn't crashing a celebration tonight. She was the celebration.
The city's Women in Leadership Gala had selected her as their keynote speaker. Not for surviving a scandal, but for building something real out of the wreckage, an event firm that now handled contracts across 4 cities, a mentorship circle for young women in business, and a life rebuilt not in the shadows of betrayal, but in the sunlight of clarity. The applause faded as she stepped up to the podium. Her fingers curled around the mic with confidence, not trembling, not unsure, but rooted.
She looked into the crowd and paused.
And then she said something no one expected.
"I'm not here to talk about success tonight. I'm here to talk about silence."
Because that's where I found myself, the night I realized the man I loved had already replaced me in his mind, and worse, had tried to erase me in his life.
The room grew still. Tanya didn't cry. She didn't break. She bared truth.
She told them about the candlelit table she once set for 2. About the moment in the restaurant where she realized she'd been mourning a man who was still very much alive, just no longer hers. She told them about what came after, the paper trail, the betrayal, the woman who unknowingly stood in her shoes.
But most importantly, she told them about what she chose next. Stillness. Strategy. Self-respect.
Some people will spend years preparing speeches for the stage, she said. But the hardest speech you'll ever give is the one where you say nothing, and just leave.
Leave the room. Leave the story.
Leave the people who only loved the version of you that needed saving.
There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Not because Tanya was sad,
but because she was real. She closed her talk with a final, quiet offering. To every woman who's ever been lied to, left out, overlooked, or quietly erased, please hear me. You are not optional.
You are not forgettable. And you are not replaceable.
Some endings are gifts with ugly wrapping. And sometimes, the person who betrayed you wasn't your worst heartbreak, but your biggest breakthrough. As she stepped down from the stage, her daughter, now 10, ran into her arms. Ava whispered, "You looked like a queen, Mommy." Tanya smiled, kissed her forehead, and whispered back, "That's because I stopped chasing kings." Stories like this aren't just entertainment, they are reminders that silence can be powerful, and knowing your worth is the loudest thing you'll ever do. So if this shook something in you, hit that like button to honor every woman who chose dignity over destruction. Share it with someone who needs to remember what rising looks like. And subscribe, because we're not done telling stories where justice isn't just served, it's styled, spoken, and unstoppable. Now tell me, what's one moment in your life where you realized you deserved more than what you were settling for? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.